Hey everybody, this is John and welcome to the free video. And what I want to do here is take a look at the key indexes on the weekly chart and the daily chart and talk about a couple of trades that we're in. Main thing here on the weekly chart, this is the first time that we have tested the 89 period moving average since something like around February of 2016. So the first time in 2 years that we've reached the 89 period moving average here. I've also got the Bollinger Bands on here. You can see we're testing that lower Bollinger Band on the weekly chart. And of course, the daily Bollinger Band here has been trying to flatten out since we put in our lows a couple weeks ago. And the question is, are we going to be able to retest those lows on the S&Ps? If we take a look at the Qs at this point, again, same thing. We actually pushed through that 89 period moving average. It's the first time we've done that in a couple of years on the weekly chart. And then today we actually took out the lows there. The daily, and this fired off short. Now this fired off short, when typically on something like this, if it fires off short this far away from the mean, that's the mean right there, this oftentimes ends up in capitulation. So tomorrow's going to be a big day. If we look at, I'm doing this after hours, it's about 4:30 right now Central. So if we look at the NASDAQ after hours, it hasn't reset yet. It will. I want to see where it reopens and kind of sits off there. And then from here, then the next question is like, okay, what are some of the other key sectors here pointing towards? Well, the two things I like to watch here are the financials. All right, and you can see the financials here have actually been, in comparison to the indexes, they've been holding up okay. All right, not great. The financials here, it's one of those things I've been keeping an eye on just because of 10-year notes. 10-year notes here you can see from a weekly perspective. They're starting to turn back higher. In fact, have rallied significantly here. This decreases interest rates, which is good. The interest rates here are getting a little tight and affecting a lot of home sectors and stuff like that. Not that this is this is right at this point is just kind of a small bounce, but if at some point we're able to kind of start working our way back up just because of that. Remember, if bonds and notes are going higher, it's just a sign that they see kind of inflation waning. It's more of a flight to quality. And the fact that they're actually finally starting to rally here, it's like, okay, we're starting to see some money shift into there. And then the question from there is, what happens to the US dollar? Okay, so the US dollar here right now is the biggest detriment to the global economy and the markets as a whole. Right now we do have a weekly squeeze setting up here and a daily squeeze starting to set up, which implies much higher prices to come for the dollar. So why is this bad? Higher dollar puts downward pressure on U.S. stocks, i.e. it takes less dollars to buy the same amount of stocks if the dollar is stronger. But then from there, it puts a ton of pressure on emerging markets. All right, and the emerging market pressure, if we look at EEM, this thing topped out essentially at the beginning of the year with the strong dollar and continues to push lower here. And this is something that it's essentially a representation of a lot of the key economies on a global scale. Obviously this isn't Europe, but this is, South Africa, this is India, this is a lot of countries that are kind of considered emerging markets like that. And then last but not least, if we go and we look at the DAX, you can see here the DAX just continues to not find any footing. And so what really this brings up is that, on the upside moves, what happens is that the stock market, kind of grinds its way higher and pulls back. But on downside moves, you always get the potential of capitulation. Okay, and capitulation means that you can have a limit down day in the NASDAQ futures or the S&P futures. And the question is are we nearing that kind of phase? Well, the last time we did push that 89 period moving average on the weekly chart, it did hold. There are signs here from the put-call ratio to the skew that the downside here has been exhausted. But if we start, when you have two big down days like this in a row, and if Wednesday is another big down day, Friday is crash day. All right, that's called margin call Friday. So that's what we want to kind of keep an eye out for. This is, the NASDAQ here certainly continues to work here in a downtrend. Almost every other sector here is actually holding up. And so if this is something that was a blow-off decline for the FANGs, that's one thing. And we want to keep an eye on the FANGs tomorrow, the Amazons, the Netflix, and all those. And if at some point those are the ones were the first ones to sell off, so if this market's going to hold, those are the first ones that got to bounce, and really tomorrow is the important day for that to happen. Otherwise, we roll over and implode. All right. All right. So one of the things a lot of people have asked about is just kind of major and minor turning points. And one of our favorite tools, and gosh, we rolled this out a couple of years ago. We haven't talked about it in a while, and I call it the Voodoo Lions. And these are what these lines are up here. And so let me talk a little bit about them. Just if you have these, I'll show you how I'm using them right now. And if you don't have them, I'll tell you a little bit more about them. So they come in four main colors for the main ones. So, and there's also some what they're called moguls, but red is the most powerful. Okay, so red's number one. Green is number two in terms of power. White is number three in terms of power, and then the blue ones are number four in terms of power. And by power, I just mean in terms of like bigger turning points. So like if something to say is rallying, it may rally up to this level here and kind of pause and catch its breath, and then continue on and pause and catch its breath, and maybe come back down. But really, what's happening is it's kind of being attracted to a bigger snow line. Okay. And then if it's going to come down, if it breaks a snow line, it may pause here and trade back and forth, but really it's attracted to that bigger fire line. Okay, so think of these as just big magnets, and you just want to know where they are. Now, what's great about these is unlike pivots, which change every day, these things don't ever change. They're always there. Okay, and they're just they're based on logic that when I first heard about it, I was like, okay, I'm calling this voodoo. Like, this doesn't make any sense to me, but they work, so I'm just going to call it voodoo. So one of the biggest things I'm watching in the markets right now is the fire line on the S&Ps. All right, so we've come down here, we banged into this level, we popped, and we've come back down again, and this is the battle line right here, what's being drawn. So it's good to look at this kind of from a macro perspective, but you can also look at this if you're, just from a day trade and say, okay, all right, I get it. Here's the NASDAQ, and it's coming down, and first of all, we were kind of consolidating here along the snow line, and then we came down here into the tree line, and now we've just kind of been going back and forth between these levels, and then today we puked it up down here. Well, from a day trading perspective, you can zoom in on this, and let's go to like a 5-minute chart here, and just say, okay, well, you can see in advance, okay, this level's here for years, and that when we're coming down here, if you're short, this is the area to cover shorts and potentially look at a long. And even though today the markets got trounced from here from 64 68, we rallied up to 66.20. Okay, that is a big move from 9 o'clock this morning until about 10:30. That is a move it's over that. It's like 100, and I'm trying to do my math in my head, 150 points. So that's how powerful these big levels are, and if you know where they are in advance, you can plan them out. Okay, well, and it doesn't just work for futures. For a stock like Amazon, when it was rallying up to this huge fire line here, we were watching this. It's like, boom, it came down. And here's the daily chart. Boom, it came back down, hit the snow line. Let's try it again. Boom. And then once this failed here, we knew that the next move was going to be straight to the tree line, and it dropped there in one day, which I actually didn't expect that. But these things are just like, all I can say, it's like a magnet. And when you get in between these magnets, it's like a vacuum from one to the next, which is pretty fascinating. If you look at Tesla here, Tesla, when it was coming down, 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 we crunched into that snow line. And we've been pushing through these, but you can see here it petered out at this fire line. Right now we're stuck between two snow lines for the most part. I mean, once we blasted through here, we're just kind of building up energy now so it can retest the fire line. And it's the same thing on currencies. You can see right now on currencies, huge fire line right here. Again, this has been here for years. You can see this in advance. Nice little bounce off of that level. So if you are not familiar with these and you want to learn how to use them, David Starr, who's the creator of this tool, and I will be doing a free webinar next Tuesday, November 27th at 7 o'clock Central. So we're going to be talking about how to predict future prices with 30 years of past patterns, how to trade major swing highs and lows with confidence, how to time precise entries and exits without big stops, how to identify all-time highs in advance, like Amazon, how to avoid getting in too early or too late. Okay, now whether you're swing trading or even if you're day trading futures on a 5-minute chart, the Voodoo Lions, as I like to call them, are a mainstay. I use them as targets with squeezes. I'll use them to buy and sell against, and I'll put my orders up in advance, and then I can go to the gym and come back and see if they've been hit. So if you'd like to join in on this, this is simplertrading.com/turning for Turning Point. Just fill out your name and email address here. Again, free webinar. We'll show you how to use them. If you already have the Voodoo Lions, we'll show you some new setups that we're looking at, so you can kind of come check it out. Otherwise, looking forward to it. And again, I use them a lot for day trading, whether it's futures or gap down into a Voodoo line is a great entry, or just kind of determining major swing highs and all the things that we're talking about right here. Critical in a market like this. All right, you guys have a good night, and we'll see you at the next update.